Yo, how's everybody doing? This is Mr. Anderson True Crypto 28 on Twitter. I'm doing a follow-up video here on phase recognition. For those that didn't catch the initial video, I have the link below. You'll definitely want to catch that one first, so do yourself that favor. Also, something I probably have said 5 times in my entire life on YouTube, please subscribe. Besides that, here's what we're going to do here. I mentioned in that last video, it went a little bit longer than I was anticipating. So I said I will do another video to show the phase recognition on altcoins. Again, for those that didn't watch the first video, please do. What is phase recognition? It's basically the skill that you must have, whether you realize it or not, to help you make decisions on what style of trading you should be doing or using, right? So for instance, the phase recognition has said to go up from this time period, down from here. It was wrong here, by the way, so I want to make sure we point that out. But up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up in a very difficult environment, right? And this so far 98-ish to about 107. So even though this one's yet to be determined ultimately, it's already yielded a couple of good trades, but this is tough when you see this. I have this boxed off for a reason, because ultimately you need to take off that last break of structure candle and then work from there. So if we can break that and work higher, that would be a good thing. But ultimately, it's not the point. The point is how do you achieve something like this? Because you might say, well, there's if we look at just price action alone, you're taking highs and you're making a lower low, and then you look like you're in bad shape. You're sweeping low, you're heading lower. So how are you looking at some of these upsides in these situations? And that's kind of the point of the phase recognition, and is that you can go about this in one way and just say higher lows and higher highs, and that's great. But then you'll notice that you're probably going to still end up in a 50-50 type scenario overall. You're probably going to put yourself in a position where you're recognizing that your edge isn't consistent when you go about things that way. And the reason why that occurs is because while we might like to look at things on an individual time frame, multiple time frames are important. So there's going to be times where the daily runs into some kind of weekly resistance, or has a mean reversion on the weekly scale, or some battle between the two, etc., where one takes over as primary versus the other. There's a lot of different reasons as to the how and the why. So the idea of phase recognition and the formula that I built is to allow a consistent view that allows me to make decisions on what direction I should be trading and the style that should be trading, and to allow me to then add edge above just looking at it as higher lows, higher highs, things like that. So that's kind of the mindset. One of the things that happens a lot is that, well, you know what, I'll talk about that a little later. Let's kind of just jump into the rules. I'm not going to stay on these very long. These are the rules I gave the other day on the first video. Pause it right now if you want to read through this and understand, in case you didn't watch the first video, so that you're not thinking that I'm making things up as we go along. And again, I did say this is going to be on altcoins, so it will. But I'm going to start off with this little poop coin here that I won't go into too much detail about here. But you might ask, me, go, why? Why would you possibly show us this thing? And I'm going to show you why in a second. Let me kind of we don't need any of this really, just this big guy right here. Why am I showing this? Because there's someone out there, right, that has been trying to trade this thing forever, right? And they've been trying to buy this low and that low and this low and that low and this low, because there's somewhere, somehow, they think this is the poop coin. This is the one. There's believers out there, etc. God bless you. I'm happy for you. But the point is, why use phase recognition? Well, because the only times that this person would have been caught up in any of this nonsense might have been in this area. But as anyone that watched the first video knows, that I would have told you, no, nothing below these two lines would you have actually believed there was an actual regime change. So really, maybe in this area a little bit, you might have thought it. Maybe in this area, and by the way, you would have performed well when you thought that, right, in this area. But no other times. In fact, if you were following the phase recognition, you would have only been shorting through all these reds. You would have been in a situation to where you get a little bit interested in these greens, etc. You would have been trading the chop back and forth. If I do bring it back up for a second, literally highs and lows, except I'm not going to go through this one because this is just more to kind of give you an understanding of like you would have avoided this. The idea of phase recognition is that you don't bury yourself in a loser. You don't put yourself in a position to where you think this might be it and this might be it and this might be it and this might be it. No, there might be times where you might jump on that train a little bit, but it's going to save you from marrying a trade. That's the idea. So let me get rid of that. As I head in here to the next one, and my computer's probably about to have a heart attack by all the screens that I have open here. This one's just XRP, right? The favorite of so many. Why show XRP? Because I want to bring something to light here, which is like this thing is priced lower than it was 8 years ago, which is really amazing, by the way. God bless the XRP believers, but it's priced lower currently, right? You see the price than it was 8 years ago, and yet there's so many believers in XRP. So why bring it up? Well, because something like a phase recognition, again, could have had you participating in the entire event where it did stream up to that ridiculous, beautiful structure. It would have also had you in a situation to where you notice it turns green, and I gave you the rule on the last one where it said, yeah, it may be green, but I needed to show above these levels a breakout, right? So this is the first range above it. No, I needed to go above before I'm actually believing a regime change. So this helps you to stay for, by the way, this is a short and a short and a short in all perfect places and a short, all of these locations, and an ideal short and an ideal short. Pause it if you like, if you don't believe that I'm showing you the right levels, right? Because you guys know the rules already of how to follow this one. Not to mention if you're getting red, yeah, that's literally Goblin Town, right? I'm off screen. I caught myself though. I did go off screen, but I caught myself before I did. So red, like this with these two indicators. Yeah, that's Goblin City, right? That's where we want to. That's where we know we're going to see the bleed out. Green is where we could see some real go time action, but again, we wouldn't believe it necessarily until we crossed, set a range, and then broke above that range. Set a range, break above that range. Doesn't happen, right? Set a range, break above that range. Set a range, break above that range. Oh, we broke above the range. Look at that. And then we get to actually participate in this more than doubling. And then we wouldn't have switched back because same scenario, right? You set a range. Did you break below it? No, that is a sweep right there. That did not have a breaker structure below. I want a clean breaker structure below. So again, with me, we're going to go into a journey on this. If you're going to continue watching these videos that I do plan to make, at least weekly, if not more often, you're going to learn at least my style, and that's up to you if you decide to implicate. And that's how you should. You shouldn't do everything I do. You should see the things that I do and say, well, first of all, do I truly grasp and comprehend what he's saying to where it makes sense in my mind? That's got to be the first thing, or at least work towards that by studying it. And then once you do, say, oh, well, does this match my style? Is it something that I can do consistently? Then if so, and you believe it would add edge, then use it. For things that don't use it. And that's perfectly okay. You know, you don't have to become Mr. Anderson part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. You just have to become the best version of you in your trading, okay? But my point is, so now that we're in this up zone here, right? Do we make a reversal? No, not necessarily. We never cross back over and set that range. Again, I gave that rule the last video. Watch it. This is a actual sweep. It held. Now, I wouldn't have been interested in this still. I still respect the red where I would not have been watching for this, even though you see a little signal set there by this particular tool. I would have avoided this on this scale. That's all I'm saying. But once it goes green, of course, free for all, and you notice it goes green, and then very shortly after you get these huge spikes up, we would have been using all of our skills that we like to use for situations where we're long, right? And of course, they would have paid off. That's why we like to use them, because you're green. You go back to this green scenario, epic move, right? You're tripling. This is where my point is. Why am I showing this on altcoins? Because this is what your alt seasons should be. Individual. You know, everyone says, "Oh, I want alt season." Why? You want it where everything is running? I mean, I rather it be something to where we get narrative season, right? You show me like, oh, this section of crypto is going to run, and then we're going to run the layer 2s, and then we're going to raid the layer 1s, and then we're going to, please do, right? Please, whatever meme coins are going to run. Okay, if that could separate, man, that would be beautiful. But even better than that would be if some of them were running, you know what I mean? And we had an opportunity to be stock pickers or coin pickers in this situation. That'd be great. But anyway, so you go back into this blue, which is a warning. Red, obviously not good, but we need a complete breakdown and then break of structure below. It doesn't happen. This is where they mix everyone up. This is where all that's taking place. Now, sometimes, as you can see in XRP, this can happen forever, right? But regardless, green, pretty well. I can avoid some of this nonsense some of the time as well. Some of these are giving, literally long, short type scenario that you can navigate some of the sideways. I'm not trying to claim perfection through all this at all. What I'm trying to say is you just want to avoid disaster a lot of times, right? This isn't the thing that I really want to be trading too much anyway, unless it gets offsides. And that's the idea. Offsides, right? The only offsides I care about in red is going to be this one. And if it goes orange, it's the same way. That's from the first video. But then look what it gives you, a perfect type of signal, right? And it turns red even better. Now you want to ride the wave and you get to do so. Come back again. All right, try again. I don't know if this thing is going to leg lower or not, but I know for several days it ends up doing so. And we're below these levels. Come back. Yet another one. Now this one was green, but green, is that going to be a regime change when you're below these levels? No, that's from the first video. I already explained that to you, right? So no one thinks I'm painting some other picture, but let's just say you ignore it completely, which is fine, because I actually would ignore that in green. Even though I'm knowing that the regime change hasn't happened, I would have waited for something else to change, like come back to blue or something like this. But regardless, certainly once we're red, Goblin Town, right? So we're able to participate in that. I'll rush through this one and move to the next, but you get my point. This is how you avoid just years of people saying, but the banks are going to use it. That's the, XRP. All the banks are going to use XRP. You know that, right? Yeah. The banks are going to buy it from you at $10,000 a piece. I have a brother, right? You would think, like, I'm a professional trader that has a decent sized voice in this niche industry, right? And my brother doesn't listen to me at all when it comes to crypto. Just does. I mean, he knows, he acknowledges my success, things of that nature. But this guy will tell me flat out, I don't know if you know, but going back in this period, once XRP wins these lawsuits, all the banks are going to buy the coins at like $10,000 a piece. Well, why would that make any sense? They could go to the open market and buy them for 60 cents, But people believe this stuff, and that's how these narratives go for so long. But my point is I will show you this. I don't want to get too much into showing every signal on this particular video because I think the colors are going to show you enough. But when you get into this long, drawn out nonsense and garbage, notice that, yes, you participated in that, but then you got short signal, long signal, long signal, short. Oh, not that one's not the short, but long signal. Then back into this, we ignore this one. You're getting another short in there. You're participating in some of that if you choose to do so. Back into these short signals again, short signal again. Pause it if you don't believe. If you want to look closer, feel free to do so. Short signals under these environments, great. And then you can get into, I would have avoided this because of the red, but you can get into a long in here, back into the short, or at least taking your foot off the gas, finally looking for longs again. This one would have been wrong at first, but then back into a long again, right? Back into a short again. And then you would have tried a long here, which, by the way, works better than you think, right? That's the thing that happens here. These are, at least 10, 12% moves. So I'm not going to say you made money there, but you're not losing money there either during that, 15-day period where it was just grinding because you had an upside bias, and it had an upside bias during that time. But I know there's plenty of ways to get caught, so I don't want to take credit for that. But then when you drop back down in here, you might have had to take a swing and lose, but then second swing leads to good things, and then eventually into green, which of course is what we want. And the idea is to participate in those green type scenarios. That's a big thing that we want to make sure that we're understanding above all else, right? So again, red here, back in here again. So that's a concern, but we expect it to just grind into these 200s, and that's where you're going to have this grind out high time frame chop type scenario, but you get the point of how it could save you over the long term here, over these periods of time where things are in goblin town. If you're not understanding phase recognition, you might be taking another shot and another shot and another shot, which can basically put you in a position to miss the entire boat there. I'm kind of closing some screens as I go along because I'm trying to regain a little bit of memory on my computer in hopes that it doesn't mess up this particular video. Same thing here. Why do I have something? So, I've talked about this. I need this to show a willingness, right? To break out with a clean break of structure above when I get into these zones. I've already explained that, but it's not happening. But in the meantime, while I'm stuck in this chop, this is BNB, by the way, what happens? What takes place? Well, I get a short right there. I don't count this as a long, even though I get it. Direction was decent because I'm not doing anything in red. I get a short here, again, back to the downside. Because I'm orange, I'm willing to take the long. It grinds me back higher. I get a short here again. Again, that's 5 to 7 days or so of some grind down. But again, let's count that as a losing trade, even though it's clearly drifting downwards. I'm just making a point that I'm only going to count winners as crystal clear cut movements in the right direction. Okay. But the point is how we navigated that difficult element. And we're blue here at the time of the long. Now, blue, this could have been an early long signal that would have lost, another early long signal that would have done well this first time because you got 5 days of upside. But then when you get the double here, which is the yellow and the purple in a blue, yes, that's giving you the upside bias and it leads you into the green. And then you're feeling really good when you're green in that environment, right? So it gave you that leg in and then participate. This is the other big issue that I'll mention over and over again. Being able to participate to the upside, meaning you're having a bias that says I'm looking for reasons for as long as this exists. Now, sometimes it's only a few days, and guess what? It didn't net you that many good results. Of course not, right? Like here's a good example right here where you had this little green flash. Okay, great. Well, you didn't get great results. Now, luckily, it went back to blue pretty well, and it still gave you some up, down action, and just the whole design of the phase recognition program. But with this in general, you put yourself in a position to where, though there's going to be times where, yeah, you might say, yeah, well, it was a 5-day window and there wasn't a lot of great trades there. Correct. You've identified that. That's great. But what about when it stays green for 4 months? People, they always miss that part. So you're really missing that. And I always know that that means that it's never happened to you. Now, I want you to think about this, right? You never got to take anything personal when someone's speaking to you or trying to teach you and help you, right? If you know things, great. Maybe I'm repeating things you already know and you don't need it. That's fine. But literally as a life lesson, just understand that in these moments, you want to try to think like, all right, well, is there something to be learned there, right? That's a big part of it. So the big thing that happens, a lot of people, they're really already trying to argue with themselves and tell you, oh, that's not real. And oh, that signal's not that good and things like that. And I promise you, I've seen it for many years. It's just a natural thing. I never saw it actually before getting on Twitter. It was the first time that I noticed something like that. I was like, oh, well, this is weird because when I started my career a couple decades ago, when we would speak to someone online, and yes, I'm not that old. We did have internet in the late 90s, and you could get on and have like some voice override type talk. But we were so respectful to the other traders at that time, and just, yes, hi, please tell me your thoughts on NVIDIA. And yes, NVIDIA existed back then, but please tell me your thoughts on NVIDIA. Thank you very much. And we would basically just wait for their answer. Thank you for your answer. Wouldn't matter if they gave us a trade idea and it was wrong. Obviously, people get trades wrong. We understood that. Point I'm trying to make, though, is I was getting into this section where don't allow yourself to be blinded, right? If you don't recognize that there is a amazing amount of edge by being in a position where you are looking only for longs during this green period, then you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. If you don't recognize that this system gave you this long and this short, then I don't know what to tell you. You're in a position to where you're missing that you were able to cap the top and the bottom. Now, that won't always happen, but the point is it will happen enough to provide you a significant amount of edge, obviously. And that's kind of the point here. Ultimately, that's the idea here, is to give you a better, you're putting on 2020 type vision here to say, okay, now I see something that's going to allow me to use my skill set more effectively. Now I can actually have a consistent view of the market, and that's going to let me know, hey, when should I use my range techniques? When should I use my long bias techniques? When should I use my short bias techniques? And that's where suddenly this game opens up, and you suddenly can say, oh, technical analysis now actually can work in this environment. It's not all 50-50. So I won't focus too much on that, but I do like to point that element out. I'm not going to delete these anymore because I think that was kind of giving me more negative results than I wanted. And I'll rush through these last few. This video will end very shortly. Why bring up this like injective? So this thing, one of the things that I've heard people say is like, oh, there's been no alt season. Bitcoin's been about straight up, right? If you look at the high time frame for about 3 years, which is an amazing run, and then people go, "Oh, this is the worst bull market." It's the worst bull market ever. Really? It's the worst bull market ever? That's interesting because I remember things like this flying where it went from $7 to about 50, right? Yeah. I remember we were talking about it on Discord. We were talking about the high flyers that we wanted to trade. And how were we able to point this out? Well, one of the ways we were able to find these things is that there are things you can do with this tool up here that will help you to decipher the type of list of coins you want to follow in bear markets and in bull markets. And that gives, you can use totally different thing that we're looking at to find what I call high flyer list, ultimately things that have the chance to do this, because that's where you want to participate. But if you don't see that there are a bunch of coins running from $6 to $50 as an alt season, I don't know what to tell you. And again, that's how this tool is going to help you, because it could be alt season when things are in green, and then it could be chop season when they're in blue and orange, and it could be short season when you're in red in these orange type scenarios, right? That's the idea. And might you get caught up by some phases that turn green and don't play out? Yeah, of course, you'll also be protected by the fact that I've already told you very, very clearly that when that does occur, you want to see a clear breakout, meaning break a structure. That means the close happens outside of that area, right? And then when that happens, oh, okay, then we might have ourselves a regime change here, right? When you start playing with these levels, that's where they want to get you all mixed up, taking sides, and they realize, oh, wait, people are off balance. Now, within that slop, though, what ended up happening, you still were able to navigate one hell of a short there, one hell of a perfect short there. You're getting the point, and you're still red in these environments, still trying to jump on things, right? Why? Because that happened below these levels. You could have participated in that. Anyway, so the key there is that don't get caught up in this whole idea of like, oh, there's no alt season. That's interesting. Okay. Other thing is, recently everyone knows about this thing, right? Zcash, good old Zcash. You got the Dino just going nuts. One thing I'll point out, I think we talked about this one a little bit on the last video, but first and foremost, you're in a situation to where if you were paying attention to this, you still got a long here, right, in this area right there, even before it went green. But then once you are in this green scenario, yes, you are only looking for reasons to long. Now that might be on lower time frame, it might be on the 4 hour, the 1 hour, the 12 hour, etc. You might be looking for top side support to hold each time, and you'll see that every time that happened is once, twice, 3 different times here where your top side support held, it gave you beautiful trades, right? You might just draw a very simple trend line as it begins to pull back. The moment the trend line's broken, very simple. It's just the very earliest little tiny sign, but in an uptrend, dumb stuff and simple stuff like that works. You just have to know when to do it. What about green phases? Green, see, green and green, green and green, green and green, green and green. What happens in those phases? They take off. Now, when you go parabolic, are you going to use a daily scale tool like this that's giving you phase recognition to short this level right there? No, not in a blue sky breakout, meaning you would need it to be part of a resistance if that were to occur. But that's not what this is for. This is not saying, hey, I'm going to long at 50 it's going to go up to over 700 and you're going to catch the very top. No, no, that's not the goal of this. Now there's some ways to kind of look for warning signs, and the lower time frames are going to be the key to things like that. But if you're missing the gloriousness of this 15x that occurred, then again, don't know what to tell you. And how's it possible? It's possible because this tool would have told you, yes, this is one you want to stay actively playing in, right? Every single breakout pays in this environment. If a breakout suddenly didn't pay, well, then that would be a warning sign that something has changed, right? Just like so, if this level came and we swept this level, yeah, we might be a little concerned in that situation, right? So the idea, though, is that what got you there again? Phase recognition. Let's go backwards in time. If we want to go backwards in time and look at something like this, we'll say, oh, okay, make it a little bigger. Now, there was another period that this thing ran back in 2024. You could have participated, but would you have been thinking about that at any other time? No. Now, if you want to be someone that's just DCAing it because you've always thought, believed in it, well, that's fine. I'm not saying anything against that type of strategy. That's up to you and how you go about and what you believe in. But if you're a trader, I mean, you're not feeling the pain of any of this. And in fact, if anything, you're shorting during those periods and shorting during those periods. Anytime you see a very long, prolonged orange, red campaign, even when you have some blue and green, if they're mixed in below these 200, every bit of this, I would not have thought about longing. Not any moment would I have considered taking any of these longs. Now, maybe I would have want a mean reversion in here if there's a higher low with the structure, and I could see something looks good on some time frame and I want to run it back to a mean reversion of 200s. So be it. I would have been a little disappointed because I would have preferred that to run into it and just try to at least fake me out and trap some people if that's the case. So my point is that even those were weak longs in that situation, and you just don't fall for the trap is what I'm saying on these daily time frames of saying, oh, I really want to make trades to catch these little legs. Like, that's my point. That's the point of the phase recognition. It's not that there's not money in these legs to the upside. It's that there's just a lot easier ways to live. That's the point. You want to live chasing longs in these environments. That's the point. Even when they don't play out, okay, I don't mind. I'm willing to take my little losses when that occurs, because sometimes they're going to net me these where I'm playing longs in a 15x. I mean, I don't think people, again, if you don't see that and it's not super obvious, I apologize. It means that you've never participated in one. That means clearly you don't know the thrill of looking for longs day in and day out in this type of trend, and it feels good. And you're on easy street when it happens. The only thing you're worried about then is looking yourself in the mirror and telling yourself it's not me, it's the trend, because otherwise you're going to get a big head and start losing your risk management. Okay. So hopefully people see that as well. Let's see what we got here. Solana is the next one again. Oh, there's no alt season. There hasn't been an alt season. Okay, there hasn't been an alt season. Hold on one second. Sorry, that took a quick call in the middle of this video. Anyway, situation here where, oh, it's alt season. No, there hasn't been an alt season, what I was saying. But you guys remember Solana season, right? I'd much rather participate in those. And what happens? You get this situation, clean breakout. This thing goes and goes and goes and goes. And you were green from essentially 21 to 200. You had some areas of chop here again, but then back to this green to make its next leg back up, back into that 275 range. And this could have been your season. It could have been your alt season. You could have participated in the whole thing. And guess what? It did well in the chop as well with the signals that we discussed. And it puts you in that position. Now, when you go parabolic and get yourself to some crazy levels, unfortunately, the end result is going to be some kind of high time frame, just glop of a mess in here. But believe it or not, this is going to help you in those situations, because you're going to understand that. You're going to begin to start to see it for yourself and to look for the footprints and have an understanding that, hey, I've been involved in this. So yeah, I'm breaking down below it. When I make a little bit of a comeback, I'm probably coming back into this level. I have to show conviction above it one way or the other. You might get some chop that's tricky in there, etc. A couple little bit of moves. But what happens if we go through the actual signals each time? All right, well, if we go through the actual signals, and we were red during this process, great. You might say that this began to give you a short, which it did, and there was some sideways chop in that, downward slope, as you can see, and that's a bigger range than you think, obviously, when you're moving from 150 to 140, but still, that's hard trading in either direction. In that situation, probably, I mean, there's 6 days in there. If you were trading to the downside during that, then yes, you did fine. But again, I'm not taking anything that's just not the most obvious, clear win. So I won't count it as such. But guess what happened here? You begin to get yourself in the position where you're in blue, where you're open to, these resets coming back. This is not a long, but I'm just making you understand that you would have understood that it could come back into these levels, and you wanted to show you something, some kind of break a structure one way or the other. This one finally does break out. It was hard to get any of that move. By the way, this would have been a short right there. You would not have taken a long on this system with this. Nothing going on here. You're staying away from until it really gives you a clearer signal, and that's kind of the whole point. And then it pulls back into this signal, clear cut signal, right? That double right there, and that gives you the long in here. No shorts in there at all. Now you're green for a period of time. You participate in this move to the upside, and then eventually gives you this short. So all of this, you went from a mess with a couple short signals into a beautiful long that gives you that first clear lower high short beautifully in there, another short there, etc. And you can see the advantages here, right? Of how this helps you to ignore some of the noise and just take edge-based plays. Not that they're all going to work, but they are now going to have edge because your approach has edge. Your consistent view allows for the edge. It allows you to make the determinations that are possible for that edge. Okay. Did I have any others that need to be shown? I don't know. None of them are, at this point, I think you get the point here, but why show this? Because it's been a difficult trade, right? This thing is not easy. I got a little excited about it over here. Didn't really play out. I got some trades that worked out here ultimately just recently from it, but then it started to reverse back, and it is what it is. But even in this mess, I wanted to point that out again, that you end up in this situation to where you get this nice green uptrend. You see the red gives you downtrend, green gives you uptrend for a while. But then when you get into this sideways noise, you end up getting a short here. We don't mess with this long because we don't like the environment of the high time frame chop that we're seeing here. You started to entertain a short here, but it did go green. So let's say we ignored it. You might even have taken one in there, depending on how quick you were in the lower time frames. But again, remember, you normally want this line here to cross back to the downside. But I understand any low time frame trade that if it gave you that signal on this day, which was possible, you would have got caught. So you might even call that a loss in there. But my point is, I would have ignored a lot of this. I'm ignoring the green also. I'm waiting for that full double reset here, which happens here. So I said I said there was a beautiful short in there, and then a nice long in there that led me into a nice short in here, right? That led me into a long that probably worked out a little bit, but let's call it a loss anyway for the sake of conversation, into a nice short here, into a long possibility here, into a short here before this weird day here, which is, of course, that black hole day that we had in crypto here. This would have had you looking for shorts during that time, and most coins look that way as well. And then we did get that little green issue, and this did provide a nice little upswing, which of course that's a big move, guys. That's $350 to $500, but still on that ultimate high time frame, what's happening here is on a weekly scale. This thing is going through something. It's trying to get people off sides one way or the other ultimately to make a move, but we can navigate some of this mess, because if you look at this chart just like this, yes, there's a couple trends in there, but there's a mess. But I just showed you that we caught a few trends for sure, but then also we're able to navigate some of that nasty chop. That's the idea here. Okay, survival, right? More than anything. That's really it. I think that's the ultimate. Again, that Solana should be the one that really just jumps out at you for sure and gives you that understanding that the point of me showing this video is that the phase recognition can allow you to have your own little mini alt seasons when you're scanning through and saying, oh, this is the one I want on my watch list, and this is my high flyer. And having that ability to have a consistent approach and view of the market is what's going to allow you to do that. Even this video probably went 10 to 15 minutes longer than I expected it to, but hopefully you guys got something from it. The idea here ultimately is that I just want people to notice some of the obvious thing. Green regimes print to the upside more often than not. The red regimes print to the downside, especially when they're below the 200s more often than not. Same thing with the greens. You want them above those 200s. You'll notice how the orange and blue zones allow you to mark that chopped area and give you shorts and longs on both sides. That's the idea. That's what I mean by edge. It's not prediction. This isn't prediction. It's structure. That's the idea. You're looking for structure in your approach, structure in the way you go about applying your systems, because we all have systems, and if you don't have systems, you should be trading one way in an up market, another way in a down market, in a totally different way in a market that's chopping around. So when you can plan, you can trade with confidence. That's the idea. So this allows you for that. So don't forget those elements of it. That's a key part here. Because the idea, I touched base on this earlier. I said I would go back to it. You could have, one of the things about the price action. Again, people always think I'm picking up price action. I'm not at all. You need price action. There's people that have price action only techniques and abilities that allow them to print money. And those people that are doing that, they already trade this way. See, they already have a phase recognition that's built into their mastery of price action, if that's the case, if they are in fact doing a good job with this, right? That's kind of the idea here, is to point out that you might need this or probably need this and don't realize it. So that's when I come about the price action guys. And I think what happens to the guys that haven't mastered price action, that still swear by it, like there's no tomorrow, even though they're not making money or 50-50 or go on tremendous losing streaks, what those people are not realizing is, for instance, in PA, for those that have some basic understanding of price action only trading, you might mark off an order block and you say, hey, this order block, right, is key. And then ultimately price comes back to the order block you're taking along and it breaks. Well, if you were using an indicator, what people would say is, oh, the indicator failed. But the people that like to use the price action only language, what they say is, oh, it's a breaker now. All right, well, that's great. It is a breaker now. You're right. But that's another way for saying it failed. Your level failed, just like if you were using a tool that failed as well. And then the interesting thing, now it comes back to the breaker and you're thinking now, well, now it's going to hold the other way. Well, no, it doesn't. It breaks the other way. So now your breaker broke, right? So you end up in this situation where because of the language that's used, it allows you to miss that really, no, the way you were applying that technique was a failure. Just like any system has failures, price action has significant amounts of failures as well, because it's really dependent on this phase recognition. Was I right or wrong about the overall direction about the market? People, they don't like to admit that, but that's the key, right? We are guessing. Sorry to break the news for you. We're all guessing. If you don't believe me, come over. We'll place your hand down on a table. And if you're wrong, I'll chop a finger off. And no one's going to take that bet, because that's the moment you're going to finally accept and realize, oh, wait, I don't know. I am guessing. Now, we want to be the house. We want to be the casino. We want our guesses to have edge. We want the probabilities to be on our side. And therefore, we need this skill. That means you got to go back to the drawing board and figure out, can I view a chart in this manner without these colors on the screen and provide significant edge in terms of the direction? And the big keys is you better be catching these green phases and these red phases. If you're not crystal clear on identifying them early, right? You see, I notice how we're catching them early. Those are happening early on. Obviously, if you come off of a big uptrend, you're not going to catch the red early, because you're parabolically advanced to such a degree that you have to give some room for mean revision. Otherwise, you wouldn't stay green during these runs like this, and you would be missing the boat, right? So the point I'm just making is that that's why you got to divide your chart to two halves. We could talk about that in other videos, but the point is that this is something to where it's up to you to be honest with you, right? And to go back and look at the history, probably use some assets or some stocks or something like that you never really looked at before. And I would mark the charts off, with some kind of color coordination of sorts as you're going through it with the replay mode, and just see, are you able to do it? Are you capable of doing this? Because if you're not with edge, then that means that, I'm sorry, you are trading with the wrong technique the majority of the time, and that's why you're failing. More than likely, right? Some of you just need to develop some of those skills as well, and that's fine. But the problem is that No, you might have great entry techniques for your longs, but if the market's not going up, that entry technique sucks, or it's 50-50 at best. I keep using this word because I just can't put it another way. And I think the epidemic is people aren't asking the right questions, and they're not coming to the reality because there's such a situation in crypto especially, but on X where you get these traders, and unfortunately they're much more interested in being right than about making money. And the reality is the key to making money in this business is knowing when you're wrong and admitting when you're wrong. So you have to take those steps to put yourself in a position to be willing to address it this way. Anyway, I'm out for now. Again, feel free to comment in the section with any questions you might have. If the question is, oh, I want to participate in whatever you're going to do with these particular tools, and so be it. You can mention that in the comments, but don't DM me. And for now, if I do that, I will go ahead and make that announcement soon. But I'll put some more videos out on this because I want to continue to help with this type of content because I believe, again, it's come to me and now to a point to where I can't get off of it because I realize, like, wait a second, I'm realizing that the group of people that I'm going to help are going to realize that this is an epidemic in their own technical analysis study, and it's a hole that they need to fix, that they need to come to a situation. So clear the colors off the screen and understand in your mind that no, if you're not able to hit on 50 to 70% along swaps of areas and trends, then somehow you've missed the point of this game. Maybe you were too close. And by the way, if this is also different for markets. So if this is I'm talking about crypto and stocks, right? If you're trading, I probably shouldn't go into the subject at all, but if you if you're trading fiat, for example, right? So you're in a situation to where, those markets are mostly going to chop. So that's part of the thing that happens. A lot of the guys that are price action guys, they can kind of get away with it because their real skill is ranging markets, which is fine. That's a great skill to have, so it's not an insult in any way. But because of that, they tend to play just about everything as if it's ranging, right? Unless there's some very clear breakage structure, which actually is a decent way to go about it. But that's going to get you in trouble in these heavy trends. That's why a lot of the price action guys, not picking on any of them, they usually struggle on calling bottoms and tops. And by the way, tops a lot harder to call than bottoms because no one wants to give up the dream. Basically, by nature, most people are bullish. But the point is that over time, a lot of these guys that are very popular, unbelievable amounts of followers, way more than me, they miss badly on the bottoms, and they tend to hold on and think that it's still going because they have the actual mentality of that high time frame chop, which is very helpful and looks good and looks great in posts and things like that. But in reality, a lot of those guys, and by the way, if you're not one of those guys, if you're a price action trader that's hitting on all these things, I'm not insulting you at all. Please don't take it that way. Very, very sensitive community at times. But my point is like, no, I'm only speaking to someone that if they say like, no, I struggle in these moments, then that's part of it, that you're failing then the key element of identifying a trend. And that is a big issue, right? That's a major issue because I got to tell you, that's where the easiest money comes, right? So if you're catching one of these and you're missing out on four of them, meaning like even if you had four that didn't really take off on you, first of all, it's going to net you some good trades in those anyway. But even if it didn't, by catching one, no one that's rode one of these waves would ever argue with anything that I just said because you understand that that means you literally probably took 75 longs in this environment. You would. I mean, that's the point. And then you're happy to continue and just keep it going. And this is why the people that call tops, buddy, if you're someone that's a top caller and I see you all the time calling a top, you might as well just tell me I'm not trading that asset at all or not very much at all, or I've missed majority of time. Usually it's a bias that puts you into a position to want to call a top. Ultimately people, even this, you say, oh, it's a top. No, it's a local top, right? But this thing continued on and gave you still significant longs along the way, right? That people could have taken for a variety of reasons. But the point that I make though is that this is part of this whole phase recognition where it's like, look, maybe you're great at range trading. That's good, but you're going to find holes in your game then when things are trending. Maybe you're great at trend trading. But that means that when things are ranging, which is the majority of the time, by the way, then you're going to have holes in your game during that time as well. And all I'm saying is why? Why would you want to have holes in your game? I'm a couple decades in, and I'm always trying to think of ways to make little adjustments to improve. If and anytime I see a guy on the internet who's posting some stuff, he looks like he has something interesting going on. I'm a little bit curious. What's he doing? I don't change my technique, of course. I'm fairly married to it, but I do, just like in my marriage, if I see my wife has this, she might have 4 issues with me. I may not address them all, but I'm trying to work on one at least at a time. I say, all right, well, she doesn't like these 4 things. I can understand that, maybe I have a justification, but that's not what life's about. In a marriage, you are to serve your wife. And if you serve your wife without expectations, you're going to have a happy life. And by the way, she is to serve you without expectation as well. And if she's doing that, you're going to have a happy marriage as well. So my point in that story was like, yeah, I promise you, I'm working on one of them. And it's the same thing in my trading. I'm not changing my system because my system allows me to live and never worry about. I don't ever think about losing. If I happen to lose money this month, I'm certainly not going to lose it next month. I'm a consistent trader for many, 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 many years, and I've never had any thought of having a losing year or anything along those lines. And it's because of these type of things that I'm explaining to you, right? So why bring it up? I brought it up because even though that's the case, if I see something, I might make a slight adjustment to what I'm doing, or realize like, oh, you know what? I used to do that and I stopped doing it as much and I kind of pushed it aside and I probably shouldn't have. Things like that, little adjustments along the way. And that's what we should all do. We should have a form of mastery that we think, all right, this has a lot of edge. And then we'll kind of let someone in a little bit and say, let me review this. Does this help? Does it not? You might play with something for a couple months and we're like, you know what? It doesn't really help as much as I thought. Or you might play with it a couple months and realize, oh my goodness, this actually is increasing my edge significantly. We have to be on that journey constantly. Okay, I rambled on for far too long. I'll put this more on the next video. I'm out. Take care.